What if the next medical breakthrough could change thousands of lives? Welcome to Moving Medicine Forward, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on groundbreaking healthcare innovations. I'm your host, Jeremy Schrand, and together with CTI's leading experts, we explore the cutting edge of clinical research transforming patient care. Each episode, we dive deep into the stories behind medical advancements, featuring insights from global therapeutic experts who are literally changing how we understand and treat critical disease. From rare genetic conditions to revolutionary treatment protocols, we're not just discussing research, we're highlighting the human stories driving medical progress. On today's episode, we welcome back our Chairman, CEO, and founder, Tim Schroeder. He is joined by Chuck Scheper, Board Chair of Bexion Pharmaceuticals and 33-year cancer survivor. They discuss Chuck's journey from cancer diagnosis to getting involved with Bexion, who is working on new treatments for both colorectal cancer and chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. Chuck, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on today.
Great to be here.
We're also joined by our CEO, Tim.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending when you're listening to this.
So let's get right into it, Chuck. When you were just 39, you were diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma and told it wasn't curable. What happened next, and how did your experience in clinical trial shape your understanding of medical research?
Well, when you are faced with that kind of a diagnosis, it's kind of a foggy period of time. Fortunately, I had a friend who told me about an organization. It was called the Wellness Community that was a support network for cancer patients, and they encouraged me to go there. It has since been consolidated. It's now called the Cancer Support Community. But they encouraged me to consider a second opinion. They talked about being patient active because you lose a lot of control, when you're diagnosed. And so it led me to seeking a second opinion and to a center in Boston, Dana-Farber, and a doctor, Dr. Lee Nadler, who is probably one of the preeminent specialists for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that really set me on a course of an aggressive treatment. He had a clinical trial that was going on and gave me the best hope for a full recovery. And so, I encourage everybody, particularly if it's a tough diagnosis, to consider getting a second opinion.
Now you serve on the board or as a board chair of Bexion Pharmaceuticals and support several cancer-related causes. How does your personal story fuel your commitment to advancing the new therapies?
Well, once I was able to survive the transplant, it was quite an ordeal. I made a promise to myself. I said I always wanted to be able to look back 5 years and say I wouldn't change anything. It really led me to make some major changes in my life going forward from a career perspective. I retired early, and about the same time that I retired, I wanted to focus more on my nonprofit work and trying to do other things in the community. I found out about this company that had a very promising cancer drug. And, I met the founder and got very excited about the prospects. And they were seeking to raise some money. And I actually made 4 phone calls in support of that. We were able to raise about $2.6 million, and which really kind of set the company on a course of being funded from friends and family. I became chairman of the board, and, that was in 2010. So it's been quite a journey from that point to this stage.
Yeah. So Bexion partners with CTI. Can you talk about the collaboration and how it came to be and how the shared values around patient-centered research have shaped the work?
So I think it was around 2014 or 15. We were looking to start our clinical trials, and we did a national search, in fact, and found really the best partner for us was located right here in town. And I got to meet Tim for the first time, and we decided to go forward with them. Now, there were some complications a little bit with the FDA, but having a partner that really had the kind of experiences that CTI had. And I think, having not only the capability and the capacity, but also the compassion that we feel in the relationship with CTI, it's been a great partnership. And, we couldn't have gotten to this stage without that support.
Yeah. How's the partnership been from CTI's perspective?
Well, it's outstanding, has been and continues to be maybe just flipping back a little bit, Jeremy, to a few of Chuck's earlier comments. I think many people in their life end up with very difficult health problems that present themselves. And I think, there are a lot of different approaches. I think the one that Chuck has taken is one for everybody to, consider emulating if you have the perseverance and the passion and the belief in yourself to do it. Taking, incredible adversity, frankly, life-threatening in real, me, phenomena, not somebody else, but me. And then finding the treatment, having a successful outcome. And of course, now that what Chuck went through more than a quarter century ago has become more of a standard of care rather than a research opportunity. So you get to be part of it, but your benevolence, your altruism actually shapes the outcomes so that many other people benefit, including the healthcare providers. We sometimes lose that sight that they get an additional set of treatments in their armamentarium. But then to fast forward to Chuck's role at Bexion and Chuck's role in the community, is taking your personal situation and story, making that, something you live every day. And I know Chuck wouldn't want me saying this in this kind of forum, but it's out there. He recently was a recipient of the Great Living Cincinnati Award, which when you think about it, in the region, there's more than 2 million people, and they choose to honor less than a handful of people each year. And, he was the recipient of that just in the last few months. And I think it's an incredibly well-deserved award for the way Chuck lives his life and the way he has pushed medicine forward and how he has, made the philanthropy, cancer drug development, just such a part of his personal life every day. We ultimately become the beneficiary. So when you say, how is the relationship between Bexion and CTI, it goes beyond the companies, and it goes into the personal side where we get an up close, view every day of somebody who, is somebody that he's a motivator. He's somebody you aspire to be and be around. And so the words don't do justice to say what's the relationship like.
The best part of that award was the word living. So
yeah,
33 years ago, I didn't even know that I lived 33 months, much less 33 years. So it's truly been a blessing.
Yeah, it's incredible. What would be one piece of advice you would give somebody that got in that situation? I know you kind of mentioned advocating and trying to figure out what second diagnoses and things like that, but what would the advice?
I think forming a team that can help you get through this. It's a challenging situation. I had a bone marrow transplant, was in the hospital 30 days. My wife, who was my principal caregiver, I remember when Dr. Nadler was telling us about the transplant, he looked at me and he said, it's probably something you won't remember a lot about, but he looked at Julie and said, it's something you'll never forget. And it's, having a supportive spouse or significant other, family, friends. I was bald within 2 weeks of my initial 6 months of treatment, so I couldn't hide it. So I always encourage people to, be as open as you can be, because people want to help. But oftentimes you need to direct them as to how that help is most effective. And, once I made the decision and felt confidence in my doctor, it was just like, okay, let's go. Let's get through this. And I have, so.
Yeah. So what are we excited about in the future of cancer research? I'll throw that out to both of you.
I'll start up and then Chuck can add a lot of the color and specifics. But, great example. Today at CTI, we had a community member who has a long history in the field of cancer, more than 20 years, both on the clinical side and the research side. And she was highlighting the CAR T therapies, and she has had a career where she saw the first patient in the entire region treated with CAR T therapy more than 10 years ago. That has the ability to cure some of the most devastating types of cancer, and we now have several already approved by FDA and other regulatory bodies around the world. But I think we're just touching the surface, and that was what she highlighted. We have some challenges that are being met head on, relative to how do we get access for some of these newest treatments? How do we study them and understand their safety and their efficacy? How do we work in the U.S. specifically around reimbursement? That tends to be a different issue in some of the other countries around the world, but she really highlighted the potential, and she showed one particular slide that suggested there could be more than 200 approved cell and gene therapies. And if you look at it, the vast majority of these are being directed at cancer. And I think if you look at the initial CAR T therapies, they have been focused around blood cancers, the leukemia, the myelomas, the lymphomas, and things like that. But I think that whole wave of treatment, coupled with new classes of drugs like BXQ, that I'm sure Chuck will want to share the great news about that. But I just think it gives a lot of hope for places where we don't have great outcomes today. When you think of things like brain cancer, pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, unfortunately, while we've made great advances in other treatments like leukemias and lymphomas, we've not necessarily cracked the code yet on how to prolong and potentially save lives and develop cures there.
I'll talk a little bit about Bexion and our drug BXQ 350. It was discovered at Children's Hospital, and it's kind of a first-in-class drug that we had very positive results in our phase 1 clinical trial about safety. So very safe drug, over 1,100 doses, only one serious adverse event. But in our phase 2 study for colorectal, and actually in our phase 1 study, we had patients reporting that the neuropathy that they had from prior chemo treatments serendipitously had improved. So we did some additional research and found that our drug also had this ability to mitigate and in some cases reverse the effects of long-term chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy. I think there are about 30 million people living with neuropathy. Right. Only about 10% are this CIPN, 60% are diabetic, and another 30% that they don't really know the cause, but there's no approved drug. So our drug, in addition to having cancer-killing capabilities, we believe, could also mitigate horrible side effects of other drugs. So we're dosing in combination with Folfox, which is a very toxic drug. And in our phase 2 trials, we're seeing that we are able to mitigate or reduce some of the horrible side effects, which allows the patient to get a longer course of treatment with the standard of care plus our drug and improve the quality of life of the patients, which is somebody who went through a pretty horrific experience. Having that kind of an opportunity is really quite remarkable, and we're excited about getting this, continuing to advance it, but really trying to accelerate it so it can start helping people.
Yeah, that's incredible. I know that I've personally had some people reach out about that specific trial, about the neuropathy trial, because they're living with it, and they knew that I worked at CTI and saw that we had a study that we were helping with, and so it's interesting when you get to see like the effects that, and those are things that people are looking for, that cure for cancer, and they forget about all the other stuff that comes along with that, unless they're in it.
My feet right now are tingling from the treatment I had 33 years ago. It's a little annoying, but some people have very debilitating long-term effects of the treatment that they've had.
You've beaten the odds, 33 years, and you've stayed committed to the space for over 3 decades. What would your message be to the next generation of researchers and patients?
Just never give up. I mean, we've been at this for almost, I think Bexion was founded in 2006, so almost 20 years. And drug development is not for the faint of heart, but
we hear that a lot.
You need to particularly have a good partner like CTI. There are bumps along the way, but you just have to be persistent and good things will happen. And, it's important to support our researchers and, whatever you can do to help advance that. But just stay the course.
Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think to Chuck's message, when you have a newly diagnosed cancer patient, and it's hard to imagine anybody around us does not have someone that's been touched or is being touched with cancer. I feel like I get a reach out at least once a week from one of our employees, family member, something like that. I think to Chuck's point, the mental mindset is really important. The optimism, the belief, and I think it's one of these things. If you have a particularly bad diagnosis, if you can buy time, there are so many treatments on the horizon, and whether it's to get into a trial or an active trial that's getting ready to submit their data, to the FDA to try and get an approval. We have just seen, I think of like the checkpoint inhibitors, which for the people who aren't familiar with that class of drugs, the trade names Keytruda and Opdivo, it's hard many times to turn a TV on or to look at something on social media, website, whatever, and not see an advertisement. Those are two of the most heavily prescribed medications in certain cancers with incredibly positive results. Now, the class of drugs is such that you have to express this particular receptor that they're targeted against. But if you are expressing that, it can be life-saving. When those drugs were introduced, to Chuck's earlier point, like we didn't know enough about it. About 80 to 90% of the original patients in the Opdivo and Keytruda studies failed because we didn't realize what they were directed at. So the idea as a patient to, one, have that social network around you, your family and friends to get you through, two, to make sure you're getting the absolute best care, and three, that you're getting access to all the trials that are out there. I think those are just such important reminders to people, which are sometimes hard to remember or think about when you're going through such very, very difficult times.
It kind of reminds me of the conversation I had with Dr. Nadler the very first time I met him. And he said, if we can just get 5 years, who knows what other advancements might happen. He said, if you look back 5 years prior, and this is in 1992, he said Hodgkin's lymphoma wasn't considered curable either, but now it's 85% curable. So, the thought that, regardless of what the diagnosis may be, if you have a good support system and you're getting the best possible care, who knows what can happen. And I'm still here 33 years later.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Chuck.
Sure.
Thank Tim for being on the podcast again.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy discovering how medicine is moving forward, or you are interested in how CTI could help you with clinical research, be sure to subscribe. Follow us on social media or visit our website at ctifax.com.